Well, I just got back from working on a lot. One of the, I work at a real estate company, so we're selling this piece of property for this fella. And it's a little overgrown. He's got a view of the lake, and, the view could be a lot better by removing some of the weeds. So that's what I was doing, So then my trailer, I got this trailer just completely full of, I cut some cedar, it was pretty full. I mean, the trailer was full, so I had to drive to the recycling center and empty it. My last video I was talking about how things happen out of the blue, a lot of times, most of the time, something breaks, you lose something, you wake up sick, break a tooth, fall down, stub your toe, just all kinds of things can just come out of the blue. But I was down there and I had to back my trailer up to where I could unload everything that was on it, and out of the blue, this fellow who had just finished unloading his trailer, he stopped in front of my Jeep and got out and walked over and said, "I'll help you unload your trailer," out of the blue. So, that's pretty nice when out of the blue somebody does something for you nice. Yeah, so I like that. I mean, that was cool. Doesn't happen that often. We all do our best. It's sometimes I'll be at the grocery line and there'll be somebody behind me has very little, just a few items, and hey, cut in front of me, or I was at the bank the other day and this lady was there with a little baby, and hey, cut in front of me. You do something. Anyhow, I've written a couple of books, and I don't charge people to read what I've written. What I have spent so much time, let's say 1,000 hours, I've proofread my book, 50 times. I've edited and just tried so hard to really make it something nice, and so then I was thinking, maybe I'd, make some videos and read my book, read it and post it. The name of my book is Abandon. And I've noticed there's a few other books out there with that title. I think when I was in high school, people would have said, Ron he would never write a book, Not too good in English. I really didn't care to read. When I was in high school, I just didn't read. I didn't grow up reading. English isn't too good. Why would I write a book? Sometimes even with my own children, maybe there's a complaint or something's lacking. You gotta just people can change. I look at my life, how I've changed. From a person who never read to a person who has read a ton of books. We change. Uh, people can change. I've changed for the better. We can all change for the better. So, I was drafted into the Marine Corps twice. The first time I was able to get a college deferment, but then I dropped out of college. It just didn't work out for me the way I had hoped. So then I got drafted again, and I couldn't get out of the second draft. So this is in the mid 60s. The Vietnam War is going full blast. So I come from that generation, and after I got out of the service, I don't know when I started to read, but I definitely started to read. I read a lot. And one day, I used to like to read books on Vietnam. Now, I was in during the Vietnam War. I didn't go to Vietnam. Not everybody went to Vietnam, I was in the Air Force. Didn't work out for me that I went. But still, I knew people that went to Vietnam, I remember the first beer I ever drank in a bar room. I drank this beer with this very nice fellow, young fellow, Carl Merchant. Well, he got killed in Vietnam. I used to like to read, you see these paperback books about Vietnam. Especially, I wanted to read paperbacks by people that were actually there. I found that's what I would like to read. And one day I was reading, and this fellow said an amazing thing. He said that at the end of the Vietnam War, the United States left behind a few troops. These weren't troops that were captured. These weren't troops that were missing in action. They weren't missing in action. They weren't wounded. They were healthy. They were doing their job. And, that Saigon airlift, that all happened. The Vietnam War ended very fast. Very fast. So they didn't have time to pick up, according to this fellow, some of the troops. See, some of the Army, they call them LRRPs, long range reconnaissance something. They go out for, maybe a month or two. They're like spies. Maybe they go out for a month. A helicopter drops them off, and they go along the Ho Chi Minh Trail or wherever into Cambodia, wherever the Army needed like spies, so that they wouldn't go out on these long excursions to fight. They would go on these long excursions to spy. I think some of them were snipers, but anyhow, this fellow said that at the end of the war, they left a couple of these guys. I don't think it was a huge amount of people, but yes, left some of them behind. And I thought, my God, that was like amazing. They were abandoned. They're just abandoned. And so I got thinking about that, like, wow, that would make a good story. I didn't know exactly what kind of story, but I thought that it was intriguing enough to think that maybe there was something there. But to tell you the truth, a good year went by. I could not think of a story there. Like, okay, what happened to one of these fellows or some of these fellows? Okay, well, they eventually got into a gun battle and they were killed. Well, there's all kinds of books like that already. I mean, that's like, that, or, someone they family starved to death or got sick and died, or I just, that wasn't, I didn't feel like that was going to be a story. And I've got this friend of mine, Chris Carlson, dear friend of mine, and a hell of a lot smarter than I'll ever be. Oh, Chris, just the nicest fella. At the time, he was married to a wonderful girl, and but Chris and I would talk, and I was telling him about my idea, or at least I was telling him about how some of these soldiers were abandoned, and we were kicking around different ideas. Could there be a book there? And well, he helped. At least he helped start the ball rolling, because it ended up that this book, the first part, he definitely helped to get it going. Well, it was, I had this book is in 3 parts. I had no intention to write 3 parts. That was never, part 2 and part 3 was never on the plate. There was no intention there. Just going to write Abandoned, like 9 chapters long. Not a gigantic book, but telling the story. But then my dad, he read it and he said, "Man, you abandoned me." Like he, as the reader, he felt abandoned. Like I didn't finish the story, and I thought I had finished the story. I left. Sometimes I'll watch a movie. Okay, like Dances with Wolves. How that movie ends, and then at the very end, him and his wife, Kevin Costner, who's playing this soldier, and his Indian. Well, she's not Indian. She's lived with the Indians. She was a captured white woman, and her Indian husband had been killed, and so at the very end of the movie, that like they write off. They leave you. They left you hanging. There's a lot of movies. There's a lot of things they leave you. Let your imagination. That's kind of what I did. I didn't think I did anything wrong, but according to my dad, so my father is the one that got the ball rolling for part 2. And then one day I was in San Angelo, Texas, visiting my mother-in-law, and it's a Sunday, not a whole lot to do. My wife and her mom are, yakking, and not much for me to do. But there's the newspaper, the Sunday newspaper, so I picked it up. I actually have that paper in a copy. I still have a copy of that, because on the front page of that newspaper, eventually I'll bring that out as I do these videos to show you, but was a picture of a nun, and it was a drawing of a nun, and it told this story about a Spanish nun, a story that took place before any Europeans, Spanish, before any white people, if you want, ever set foot in San Angelo, Texas. This is a story about this nun from Spain who never left Spain, and she never even left the village that she was born in. She came from a village, Agreda, Spain. That's up in northern Spain. She never left the village. You know, never traveled to another village. She was went into a convent that she had built. She's a very, very famous mystical Spanish nun, one of the most famous nuns that ever lived. And there's a relationship. This newspaper article was, revealing the relationship between San Angelo, Texas, and this nun back around, before 1650. That's a long time ago. A relationship that existed before any Europeans had ever visited San Angelo. That came later. What kind of relationship are we talking about? Well, anyhow, as the newspaper article talked about, gave the gist of the story, and then some books, reference books, which I then ordered. I went home and ordered them, ordered a couple of them. And I was so blown away by that story. I wanted to add it. I wanted to tell it. I want to tell it. I want to tell you about what I read. Okay, so to do that, I wrote part 3 and added it to my book Abandoned, and I was able to fit it in like an afterthought. Yet even though it was an afterthought, and like my father got the ball rolling for part 2, like an afterthought. And then I read this newspaper article, an afterthought. But still, part 2 and part 3 and part 1, I was able to write it. I guess that's just some of the history of this book that I wrote. And this, right here it says 5th edition, March 2017. Now this book I published this book. I'm a rinky-dink webmaster. I've been creating websites professionally and as a hobby for quite a few years. And after I wrote Abandon, I kind of got where I wanted to add pictures. So as I've added pictures of some photography, different editions. That was a different edition, and so all of this book, I'll be given a link. There is a link. If you're watching this video, there is a link on Patriot Stage, and you can go right to it on the internet and look at these pictures and read it. It's all free. Sometimes people say something is free and they make you, look at all these ads, Well, I don't have any ads. You don't, but you'll watch a video and then it stops, Do you have this toilet cleaner or this brand of bologna or some ad for tires? Yeah, it's free, but you got to jump through these hoops. Well, I'm I'm not giving you something where you have to jump through any hoops. And once I start, I'm not selling anything. I don't sell anything. All right. This isn't too long. And this is Abandon, Part 1. A religious thriller written by yours truly, Ronald E. Boutelle.